Good afternoon, everyone. A warm welcome to today's panel discussion brought to you by the HR Association of India. At HRAI, our mission is to create platforms that connect, inspire, and empower professionals through meaningful conversations and shared learning. I'm Neha Jagnani, and it's my privilege to be the host for this conversation. Our theme today is cross generational teams, turning diverse mindsets into a competitive edge. And today we'll explore how organizations can harness the strengths of different generations to build collaboration, innovation, and sustained performance. Through these conversations, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat window and we'll make sure that they reach the panel. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for the session, Ahmed Aftab Naqvi. Ahmed is the global CEO and co-founder of Gozo Group, one of India's largest independent digital-first advertising groups. With nearly 20 years of experience, he has helped build and scale brands like Tata, Jio, Haldirams, Aditya Birla, Mahindra, Dell, and Lego, amongst others. Honored as a champion of change by Niti Aayog and the Honorable Prime Minister of India, Ahmed has also served as a jury member of the prestigious Cannes Lions and Goa Fest. His company Gozoop is known as one of the best places to work for in India, reflecting his strong focus on culture and people first policies and initiatives. Without further ado, I now invite Ahmed to take over and lead us through this exciting discussion. Over to you, Ahmed.
Thank you so much, Neha. A very good afternoon to everyone present here. The most successful companies today aren't winning because they have the youngest team or the most experienced leadership. They're winning because they've cracked the code on making all generations work together as a force multiplier. To uncover these insights, I'm pleased to invite our amazing panel for the session. Dr. Sanjeev Rastogi, CEO Adani GCC, a qualified chartered accountant, cost accountant, company secretary, MPhil and doctorate in economics, also on the board of SSON and certified coach and master black belt. Sanjeev carries over 32 years of experience in leading global capability centers and companies like American Express, Standard Charter, HP, Deloitte, and is recognized as a top 10 leader in GCC in India. Dr. Sanjeev Rastogi, a very warm welcome.
Thank you, Ahmed. Pleasure to be here today.
Absolute pleasure, sir. Along with that, we have Mr. Vishwanath PS, who's a MD and CEO of Randstad India, which is a business and financial professional with over 30 years of experience across multiple industries. He joined Randstad India in 2014 and progressed from head of finance to shared services to CFO before being appointed as a MD and CEO in 2021. Known for driving financial and operational transformation, he has led successful turnarounds and enabled sustainable growth. A chartered accountant and Six Sigma black belt, he is also a very big fitness enthusiast. Mr. Vishwanath, a very warm welcome to the panel.
Thank you, Ahmed. Pleasure to be here.
And our third and final panelist is Mr. Avinash Kaul, who's the CEO of Network 18. He's an engineer and MBA with 27 years of experience, out of which the last 16 has been as a CEO. He has led some of India's most influential news and business news networks like NDTV, Times Television Network, and Network 18. He specializes in managing large multi-language content and operations at scale, and is recognized for driving institutional credibility, growth, and transformation in a complex media environment. A very warm welcome, Avinash, to the panel.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. Pleasure being here.
Lovely. And with that, let me just start with the intriguing question that we all have. We are living in fascinating times, perhaps the first time in history where we have 5 generations working side by side, from baby boomers to Gen Z and even soon Gen Alpha. Each brings distinct experiences, from those who started their careers with typewriters to those who never know a world without smartphones. Mr. Rastogi, you have led organizations through such massive digital transformation. Over your leadership journey, what are the most significant generation differences that you have observed in workplaces? And more interestingly, how have these differences evolved over a period of time? Are there any gaps that are widening, or are we finding common ground?
No, I think a very pertinent question, Ahmed. Thanks for asking that question. I think as you rightly said, I evolved when there were no computers, no laptop, when I was doing my CA, and we used to do manual books. There were no ERPs. They were all legacy systems. So we have come from the age, and there were defined roles, unwritten roles, but defined roles, a bureaucratic culture, a hierarchical organization, very positional vertical growth, no meaning of horizontal growth. And as technology evolved and new generations came in, I think the layers, the boundaries, and the hierarchy went away. And if I look at in last two organizations with Deloitte and currently in Adani, where we have 5 generations of people working, what has changed is clearly is the drive the current generation has. They don't believe in hierarchy. They don't believe in bureaucracy. They are very keen that they maintain their work-life balance. They are very keen that what they do, how it impacts their career, and they're very career-focused, very much digital savvy, very ready to change, and they would like to be recognized. They have their own way of doing things. So having a conversation with a Zen Alpha or Zoomers, what we call right now, is very different than what it used to be 5 years or 10 years back, where you can have constructive conversation, you'll give a structured feedback and this. Right now, everything boils down to what is next for me. The average span of a person is down to 18 months with Zen Alphas or Zoomers right now. And every 18 months, they want a different role, different change. They burn out very easily. They're pretty excited to take up new challenges, which was at our level. And if I look at first 2 generations, we pretty much got into a comfort zone. We became specialists, we become functionals. Today's generation, you challenge them and they want to do anything a finance guy can do technology guy is doing finance. So the roles have become fungible and interchangeable. So I think as leaders, as baby boomers like us, you need to be very open to understand the cultural differences. You need to come down to that level, build that connect, both emotional and understanding the aspirational part of this, understand what they are looking for, how do you bring their thoughts, creativity, utilize for your organization, leverage their digital dexterity for your advantage and benefit. And in some cases, especially in my last 2 organizations and currently, we started reverse mentoring where we brought in the current generation to teach the older generation how to change, how to accept change, and what can digital do and how to improve our ways of working. So the traditional ways of working have changed. The way we interact, engage with the alphas has changed, and you need to come with an open mindset. And I think adopt change as it is coming through. And as a baby boomer, you should need to be wary of the fact that you need to learn new things the way things are, and you can't, create a laurel that I have done this for so many years, so that will work in this current atmosphere and culture. And that's how you're able to retain. Otherwise, the attrition goes through a roof. So building that culture of openness, building that connect, building that engagement is very, very important. And bringing a mindset that you need to be at that level of conversation is important. And I have seen that, especially in last 10 years, the last 7, 8 years, that has come up very, very rapidly, and that has changed. So, and I think that's a way going forward. People are more entrepreneur mindset. People work in a startup mode. They want to move on and they like challenges. So I think we should have opportunities to create that challenge and use their creativity to benefit the organization.
Sanjeev, I think very well put. You highlighted the n number of differences, right from the what next mindset to the shorter, the startup mindset that some of the young talent have. and also touched upon some of the opportunities. Let me bring Mr. Vishwanath into this conversation. Vishwanath, from your vantage point at Randstad, you work across multiple industries, and you see different talent dynamics from a unique perspective. Okay, how do you think we can really unlock the value and the opportunity that lies in this generational talent? As Sanjeev also mentioned, reverse mentoring was a great idea as to how you can unlock that value. What are some of the other ways that we can, unlock these trends and leverage them for organizations?
Well, when we talk about generations at work, I think it's time we reframe the question. Rather than managing differences, can we multiply strengths?
Very well.
Because essentially that's what is happening. So generational diversity isn't a challenge to manage. It's a system that has to be designed. There is this Deloitte survey which says that 58% of the teams are more likely to outperform their peers on key performance outcomes when they embrace generational diversity. So at Randstad, we see this as bringing in a very distinct advantage. The real value is unlocked when organization design work intentionality, not by age, but by strengths. In the in the Randstad context, and also when we work with Indian companies, I see Gen Z bringing what I call as ethical pragmatism, and digital intuition. They don't just use technology; they instinctively understand how to use it to, get more efficiency. They are also conscience keepers. They ask the hard questions about sustainability, equity that others might often ignore. And when you look at millennials, currently the engine of our workforce, they bring purposeful agility. They have lived through the 2008 recession. They have lived through the pandemic. They know how to pivot, but they also demand that the pivot has a purpose. So they are the bridge translating the digital demands of the younger cohort to the business structures of the older ones. And then, of course, as Sanjeev said, the Gen X, the baby boomers, what they do is they bring the crisis resilience and also institutional wisdom. You cannot Google how to navigate a complex stakeholder negotiation or
Correct.
how to lead through a reputational crisis. It requires that nuanced emotional quotient, that patience that these generations have honed over the decades. So I think these are some things I would call we need to move towards reciprocal mentoring, and that is what exactly Mr. Sanjeev has well said. We need to pair a Gen Z employee's knowledge of generative AI with a Gen X leader's knowledge of risk management. And when you combine that speed with safety, you get a sustainable competitive advantage. So in closing, what I would say is when you stop asking which generation and start asking what strength, diversity becomes a very competitive edge.
Vishnu, very nicely put, making diversity into your competitive advantage. Let me get Avinash into the conversation. Avinash, in your industry, the media industry, it's so dynamic. It's so fast moving, right? Right from consumer behaviors to the way content is created, collaborated. How do you see generational strengths playing out in your industry and how you really leveraging them?
So thanks for that, Ahmed. I mean, let me first paraphrase the thing that, although the topic is cross-generational teams, I would hazard another statement called cross-generational audiences, right? Because it's not just also from the manufacturer's lens, which is us, but it's also from the consumers. People who consume news can be as young as 5-6 years old to as old as 90s. So when you are offering content, and since I'm coming from a content lens, you've got to cater to different audiences, right? Now imagine somebody who's in the younger age bracket, who's just joined into the workforce, 20-year-old, imagining what kind of content preferences an 80-year-old would be having, right? So what you see is an emergence of an inherent conflict in understanding, and hence the concept of cross-generational audiences, specifically to our media, because our products are not, you manufacture a car once and then you try and sell it to different cohorts, right? You can cater a different formats. So some of the typical things where you find a conflict or a friction arising, and to the point that Vishy talked about, that you need to find out some of the strengths of each cohort and see how it applies to the audience at that point of time. So in a newsroom, for example, there is the eternal debate between speed and credibility, right? Whereas the younger generation will look for speed, they prefer speed news, they for look like real kind of a culture. The older editor who's sitting there, who's there for decades, bringing a lot of savvy weightage into the newsroom, he's looking for credibility. He's likely to not carry the news instantly, but first verify all the sources. So now one can lead on one screen on television. Credibility has certain value because it builds a gravitas, because the older audiences tend to spend more time. On the digital, however, these 5 minutes could cost you an entire viewership, because if you are not first of the block, you have already missed the point, right? Or if you have not quote unquote treated in a certain fashion the news, you lost the audience, right? So you see that bias or the speed versus credibility plays out on platforms within the newsroom. Then there is the style of functioning. An older generation editor will have an authoritarian view of how things need to be done, that I know how to do it and I know how exactly it should pan out. Whereas the youngsters believe in, what is the creator economy today, which is collaborate and really, not have really care about the polished view that I should have a very neat, clean frame. The camera should be really upfront. They could go live from YouTube in what we call as Mojo's mobile journalism. We have enabled that for our younger reporters onto the fields. They can directly go live. They don't need an OB van now. So technology has played a lot of role in democratizing the entire coverage that it happens. Now, some of the topics that they will pick out will depend on the which age group they are in, right? So there is not just the age, there is the gender gap, right? So people who will, women will pick up some clues which are related to this. There is geographic disparity. There is all kinds of things. And as content creators, we have to cater to every single of these kinds of things. Not only is this the challenge, the largest challenge which I would like to, portray here is the definition of success, right? The definition of success by itself, like if you look at television, it is the television rating points, right? But if you look at digital, it's not really caring about that much. It's about the engagement. It's about the likes, comments, shares. Now, when you have a different metric in which you are evaluating this thing, so these conflicts, I don't think get solved. But what matters is if there is a concurrent theme that we need to represent a particular brand, it needs to have a certain value and a certain ethos. So you try not to find the different points, but you find common grounds. And in that common grounds, you rally all behind it, that at the end of the day, if it's a 24-hour channel, I need this metric, and it can come from any of these cohorts. It could come from women, it could come from teenagers, it could come from different things. And at different time bands, you employ those different teams to go after that content. Because imagine, like I gave the earlier example of a 58-year-old person trying to make content for a 14-year-old. It just won't fly, right? One is looking in a vertical format on Snap, on TikTok, or anything else, and another is looking at a different format on television, which is like this. So it's a very fundamental difference. So as long as you keep harping upon the the gaps and the divergence, it will keep fragmenting. But if you find the common ground, that yes, our job is to keep the people informed, and in whichever shape, whichever device, whichever format they prefer, at whatever time of the day prefer, and whatever length of the content they prefer, then that's the common ground you have formed. The rest is all open for people to go and win competitively. Because if you put too many chains around it, then the process will break down. So you got to allow the democratization within certain guardrails, and that is where the senior management comes in to put those guardrails in and allow people the flexibility to go and take those shots.
Great. I think, Avinash, the concept of having shared values, something that cross-generational teams have in common, and finding that, I think is a great way to unlock the true talent. Let me get Sanjeev into the conversation. Sanjeev, across your experiences, such rich experience in GCC, is there any example that you could share where, by combining diverse generational perspectives led to maybe an unexpected innovation or a breakthrough or an increase in performance, by leveraging some of these strengths?
No, there are many, and I'll talk about not only the current organization, but about my previous few organizations. So one, while we were trying to transition work from Europe. This was in 2014, 2015. And then we had to bring in a lot of language experts and language work. And we were thinking that we need to hire these experts for Max Muller and something. And when we created a SWAT team, we were able to work out a mechanism. And those days, the DeepSeek, the ChatGPT and others did not come 10 years back. So we were able to create a cross-leverage team. These people went, the willingness to learn, create a model, create an ecosystem where they could work across 27 different languages, bring that work, translate and combine that. While the transition knowledge, the functional knowledge came from the baby boomers or Gen X, but the kind of solutions we created as a cross-functional team was amazing. And that was a clear project where the ability to learn faster, the ability to translate, and ability to create solutions with speed was much higher with the Zen Alphas or Gen Zs at that point of time. The second thing was we were also trying to create an employee engagement model. So while traditionally, and that was in my previous organization with Deloitte, we looked at when we were trying to create a center of capability enhancement centers across different locations. We realized there were a lot of cultural differences across Coimbatore, Bhubaneswar, Thane, and this. That how do we bring people together, how they work in cross-functional projects, because the teams were spread out. And when the teams were spread out, how do you combine this, how the handoff works and this? So we said, let the team play that role while we will have senior guys, directors and EDs defining that project, but they will have teams spread across more from, follow the sun across APEC, etc. But it did work wonderfully well for us because they could figure out a model where the cross leverage, the sharing of experiences, and the project execution became easy for us because then the collaboration became much easier. And of course, we always look at a formal channel to communicate in a traditional way. But some of these guys were, they would bond over a cup of coffee and all that. They will have a different meetings in a breakout room and all that. So they followed a very, very different approach to collaborate, work together, and travel. And their bonding was at a different level. And I would say they broke the official barriers and they could create a solution and work together to deliver a project. So there were many such examples. And in current role, which I have with Adani Group as well, I see while we're bringing a lot of freshers from the colleges and intake, we blend them to work on complex problems and solutions and drive that solution, how that will work. And they're very keen to work on data, information. So we leverage their strengths and that comes out easily while they lack experience, but definitely they don't lack enthusiasm, passion, or co-creating something new. I think you need to have a balance, but definitely we can work out a complex problem if you involve them and give them a stake to do and work on this. And there are many examples I can talk about, but these are quite a few ones.
I think these are great examples, and I think it boils down what you just gave as examples to great leadership. And leadership fundamentally, I think, has evolved tremendously in the past decade or so. So Avinash, as we discussed in media industry, things are so fast-paced. Collaboration is key, content creation, and our audience here is huge. It's not just the talent that we are talking about here, right? How do you think leaders in your industry and in general should evolve their styles to effectively engage and motivate a multi-generational workforce? And is there anything that you're doing differently today than possibly in your leadership experience you're doing differently, say 5 years or 10 years ago?
So very, very clearly, see the way to differentiate it and what we are seeing at an organizational level. If you were to separate the why from the how, very simply put, if I were to put it, the whys is something which comes in at a senior leadership level because of experience and because of understanding the gravitas of what news can do or cannot do and how it can negatively or positively impact society, that you come with a lot of experience, right? So that's the why you do things. How you do things is the shorter style, the reel style, the platform adaptation, the everything else. if you separate the things to understand that there is a role that all the youngsters and all the newer age people are talking about the house more, where they have a, let's say, 80% share in the house and a 20% of the voice, and you have a reverse at the top where you have an 80% on the why and 20% on the house. Then you got an emergence of an ecosystem where both can flourish equally, right? So what we have done here is, for example, we run these innovation programs annually within Network 18, and we create these cross-functional pods where different people from different departments come and look at. We can, in one day, we look at a cost angle and say, okay, how can we bring down the cost? In one more day, we look at the content workshop. So now what can we do to address this cohort on this particular platform? What can we do? On one day, we'll do it on monetization, right? What are the breakthrough ideas that you think we can do on monetization? And then we let these guys form into the cross-functional teams and come back, within 3-4 weeks. And then they present to the senior management. What do? We do a live telecast within our own offices. And we do a vote-in of all the people. So the entire office technically can see them, with all the top leaders sitting as a Shark Tank equivalent, and the people pitching the ideas. And then we rate the ideas, and then we take the top 3 or 4 ideas, and then we take it to implementation. And then we also periodically update the entire workforce of around 5,000 odd people across all the states on what is the status of each of the products. So what happens is, you give a reason to a generation, a younger generation person, because otherwise they tend to burn out, because what they are seeking is that they are seeking a certain amount of relevance, that I can do something, I can bring about a change. I just need to be unshackled. And the people at the senior level are more about relevance from a different angle, that you cannot call me irrelevant just because I'm older, right? I bring a certain gravitas. So this way, what happens is you are fostering a culture where each of these pods has somebody senior, has somebody junior. So bring in the diversity, bring in cross functions, one person from monetization, one person from content. That way, what they're about to do is you have a better appreciation of what the other generation, what the other function does. And these create these modules or nodes, these create a certain vibrancy around it, that talk around, that circulates around, and it creates for a better working environment. Because at the end of the day, you cannot substitute one with the other, right? You cannot have the senior leadership, senior editors, not being there and just being let loose by algorithm kings and, things, just purely for the virality of it, right? It's the efficiency versus the effectiveness. You can be fairly efficient, but if you end up saying a news story which has different connotations, because what you're saying can incite riots or can bring back peace into the country, right? It depends on what you say. So you carry a lot of responsibility in it. So this way, what you do you institutionalize certain frameworks and not just leave it to chance that, depending on the chemistry between two people, they will now work it out or they won't. So you bring interdisciplinary and you bring generational dynamics all in one pod, and you make multiple such pod aimed at multiple groups. So one looking at content, one looking at audiences, one looking at monetization, one looking at cost. It has kind of worked out well for us, right? And whichever people are as part of these pods. So what we have now given it a name, we've given a formal name. We call it the why axis, right? So it's the people who ask why a whole lot, right? Why do we need to do this? Why do we need it? So we call it the why access, because they have access to all the kinds of things. So we're institutionalizing it. We are putting that as a shadow cabinet almost of sorts, that they are the second rung who will now, and they are not usually the second in line. They are randomly picked as long as they are superstars in the HR appraisal system and multifunction and of a certain age group. And then you empower them, you give them projects to run, and then you just sit back and enjoy and see what happens at the end of the day. Lovely. And we've seen the offtake very well.
Great. Raj, I think that's a brilliant point of actually institutionalizing certain models and systems, which then are not just dependent on the whims and fancies of a single individual. And what you also mentioned about entrepreneurship, I think the leaders of today are the ones which are winning, are the ones which are inculcating elements of entrepreneurship. I think that is that you highlighted very well in the pod structure. Let me get Vishwanath into the discussion. Vishwanath, any leadership approach or an idea that you've seen work across the industry that you're working with, and what really separates leaders who successfully engage generational talent from the ones who are really struggling?
Okay. To me, I think today's leadership is not about authority. It's about relevance across generations. The workforce comes with many expectations. So leadership must not flex, must not fracture, right? And gone are the days of command and control. So it's a shift from control to kind of clarity. It's also about treating carriers as marketplaces, not as ladders, which is traditionally used to happen. And leadership is also about, now being more of coaches, not bosses. Now, I can talk about my own example. As a CFO, we all are familiar with ROCE, which is return on capital employed, right? So, and I got promoted into the CEO during the thick of COVID, and for me, I think it was also a transition from a finance CFO mindset to a CEO mindset. But I was so familiar with the ROC example, which I used to drive quite a bit in my finance role. But as I transitioned, I talked about there is a need for this definition to be, retold. And I think hard about it, and I came up with why not be return on compassion and empathy, right? And that was a time when people needed that. So I think that kind of conscious shift has to happen. This creates the space where different generations can contribute to grow. And then I think, and again, I think the example I said, no one size fits all. So I think it's about adaptive leadership. And then for the Gen Z employees, I think it looks like transparency and autonomy is a big thing. So that needs to be addressed. For the millennials, I think it could be about partnership, or it could also be career fluidity, because they value a leader who acts as a career buddy rather than a boss. For the Gen X and boomers, it could be about respect and consultation. So they need to be recognized as wise people, need to be consulted. So I think ultimately, I think it's about how do you adjust some of these things, how do you adapt to all of this. Um and what I would say is leaders who flex by context and not age, they create environments where performance and belongingness go hand in hand.
think very nicely put, Vishy. And what was really interesting is for different cohorts, there is a style of leadership that the leader needs to evolve with, right? Right from openness and transparency for one section to really being a career buddy to someone else. I think adaptation of a leader is a very important point that you highlighted. Now, let me go to one point that has been a part of a lot of boardroom discussions. And at times, this discussion peaks, but it's somewhere there always, which is about remote versus working from office debate. And different organizations have adapted this in different manners, right? And at times, it's also possibly a generational issue because the younger talent and some of the brighter ones, they want that flexibility, as Vishwanath, you just mentioned, in their lifestyle. So, Sanjeev, I want to get you into this conversation, and from a GCC perspective, where you're managing very large distributed teams, how is this debate on remote versus in-office workforce panned out for you?
See, again, it's Ahmed, let me throw some data points. So in Adani, we work 5.5 days first, and there's no hybrid policy. So it's very different, right? And it works for us. Both in Ahmedabad and I have people at sites. So it's about the culture you want to set, because we are supporting our businesses and our ecosystem is that while the businesses, the plants, the power plants, the airports, the ports, the cement factories work 24/7, at least we work 5.5 days. And when we offer somebody to join us with different generations, that works for us, and that has worked for us. Of course, it discourages some section of people for the personal reasons, but more or less we are able to hire people for this. The second thing is that remote working is here to stay. But if I look at some of the recent surveys which a Big Four did, the numbers came out very staggering. Millennials want 41% remote working, Gen X and Gen Movers want 35%, and Gen Z is 23%. So, and Gen Alphas want to come to the office. Now, there are different aspects. One is both the social needs and personal needs. People are very conscious of the work-life balance these days. And if you see recently, in last 6 months, 80% of the global companies have moved into some bit of hybrid or mostly in office, but they give a flexibility. And they're trying to address two issues because I've been part of some of the HR conversations. One is the mental health issues and the culture you want to build in the organization. And of course, when you want to do collaborative effort, when you want to do mentorship, when you want to do connects, when you want people to go and drive customer behavior, when you want to be very closer to the customer, the hybrid won't work and the remote working won't work. And what I have seen while I was with Deloitte and here, the more you connect face to face, the body equation, the language, and everything changes, and mental health issues come down drastically. We had done a survey where we found that during the lockdown period, extended lockdown period, there were 41% cases where people were stressed out. They were sitting in remote. They had a bad call with a customer, vendor, or with their manager, and then suddenly we'll see different kind of issues popping up. So obviously, you need to have a fine balance. I wouldn't say that 100% office working or 100% remote working is good or bad, but I think it's a mix which is important. But I would say that having a flexibility to work remotely allows people mentally to stabilize, mentally to balance their work, and allows us to trust our people that they work during the hybrid. And I think now the notions come when you are in hybrid or when you are working remotely, the productivity goes down. I think that is not true. People have started working, people know what they're doing. So you need to build that trust and you get same or equivalent productivity while you're working remotely. And I think, but if you have to build a culture of collaboration, you want to build a close-knit community, different communities, you want to be closer to the customers. You need to have a healthy mix of both remote and hybrid. And that I see as going forward. And most of the organizations now are mandating that you need to be 3 days in office and 2 days you have a flexibility or 12 or 14 days of working and then remaining you can work remotely. So I think that is going to stay. That allows creativity, that allows them to manage their work-life balance better. But yes, it's not a science which you can say, but it works effectively if you have the flexibility to work both remotely and in office together.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's not a one size fits all, but balance is the key depending on industries and organization. Avinash, in your perspective in media where there's so much collaboration required, what is your take on this?
So it's a very different take if you were to ask me, Ahmed, for the very simple reason that news has never been in the office. So it depends on which teams you are in. For example, content teams will forever be outside gathering news. If you are running a business news channel, you will have a market opening which will happen early mornings, and there will be very less things happening in the prime time in the evening. In the general news space, however, there are heated discussions debates and the entire viewership is skewed towards the evenings. So you will have people coming in later and then staying back literally till midnight because that's where the audience skews happens, right? So from our perspective, it is, while institutionally it is, let's say, come to office, but it really doesn't pan out that, because for reporters and people who are in the news gathering teams, there isn't the concept of an office in that particular sense. They go on their beats, they will cover the news, they will do all that kind of things. For the business teams, however, and finance and other teams, it's something that we have kept, that you have to come to the office, and for much of the reasons that Sanjeev also touched upon. It's just a question of you're able to collaborate, or for the backend teams which are processing the video. So what happens is, how many more edit bays will you create at people's homes? What infrastructure you will deliver so that they will keep on churning, edits and have a certain style, which is, different. Each unit is looking very, very different. Like we had the largest challenges because we didn't have a single day off during COVID or during extended lockdown. We had people, anchors live from their literally homes, right? So we had to assemble a ragtag kind of an infrastructure around having zero downtime on any channel, and we had no downtime. Not even 1 minute was a blackout on any of the channel, no matter what happened, right? Sure. Even if entire offices got sealed because of whatever a case of COVID in particular thing, we had backups and then backups and then backups, because the show must go on, because the only thing that people were watching at that point of time was news, right? Because that was the only live content happening. So you got to adapt. And what has happened with that case, with that experience, is that an increased respect for hybrid. right? So there is an increased massive amount of respect. Like personally speaking, if you were to ask me, my travel time has cut down dramatically because I would fly around to all the locations. And now I just use platforms like Teams and Zooms to communicate, with all my editors and all that, different 16 different states and channels that we run our channels in. So it cut down, it increases productivity. But the emphasis for real-time bonding in a physical environment where you will go to the water cooler, have some conversations, vent out all the issues that are happening, stay updated what's going on, all of those things are vitally important. So I don't think it can be a case of that you can perpetually run your career out of sitting out of home, right? If you are as part of a corporate workplace. Absolutely. So that's just my views on that.
I think great take on that. Vishwanath, across industries, you're at a very good vantage point where you see different industries. What is the trend? Where is everyone heading? Is it different for different industries, different people as we had on the panel, or is it different in your opinion?
Well, I think, first of all, work-life balance, I think I would call it, has now become work-life integration. How do you, you often tend to do some work, office work at home. When you're in the office, you also end up doing a little bit of personal work here and there. Employers don't mind. So I think it's become a little bit more flexible from that perspective. And to me, flexibility isn't a generational demand. It's a universal expectation. 70% of the people who we interview, the first thing they ask is, do I have flexibility? Do I have options to work from home? And of course, it's a real thing that both Avinash and Sanjeev, some jobs cannot be done from home. You have to be in the workplace. Having said that, I think it is extremely important. At Randstad, our data shows that it's about trust, it's about autonomy, it's about role fit. So wherever the role can be done from home, I think employers should be giving that flexibility. For example, we are a recruitment company, and most of our 70% of our people are consultants who are actually interviewing people. Now, candidates don't show up to our office. But they are available on a screen. So I don't see a point for my consultants to come to office. They can do their interviews from home, except that we enforce that, certain dress codes, etc., need to be adhered to. So for me, winning organizations need to shift from presence to performance. It's not about a 9 to 5 attendance, but it's about what outcome you are deriving. It's from policies to principles, so you can write a lot of SOPs, but what are the principles behind it? It's also about transitioning from uniformity to choice. So for us, I think the future of work, the way we see it, it isn't remote or office, it's intentional, and it has to be more human-centered.
Vishwanath, I think very nicely put, and you mentioned this word called transition, right? And to really unlock these various opportunities that lie in workforces, the transition of leadership is very important. Avinash and Sanjeev also mentioned about that. So let me get for my last and final question. I think we have just enough time for one more question. Reflecting on your individual journeys, because see, leadership is never static. You keep on evolving and becoming richer through your own experiences. In your own experience, how has managing multi-generational teams changed you as a leader? And what is that one piece of advice that you would give to emerging leaders navigating this complexity? I would love to get Sanjeev into the discussion, start off with it. Sanjeev, I think you're on mute. Yeah.
I think one thing is, which I always feel, that you need to be aware of what's happening around, what's happening in the industry, because today's generation, especially Gen Alpha, Zoomers, they're pretty much aware and they start comparing. And social media is one where things flare up. Small thing like an employee was asked, and then you will catch up and notice that he was sleeping on the road, he was doing something, and everything happens and it spreads as a wildfire. So as a leader, you need to have your ears and eyes open. You need to be grounded, connected with the grassroots level of people, build that connect, build that relationship at the down level, understand what's happening on the ground level so that you are pretty much connected and you are aware what you need to do. The third thing is be very agile and open to changes. And what has worked in the past will not work right now. And be open to suggestions, involve all generations into the decision making, have a diverse team who can help you take those decisions, and don't be firm on any decisions because things keep changing and you need to be agile enough to adapt those changes. And I think that's a leadership style which at least has worked for me. Not being what has worked in the past will work for now. And then staying grounded, staying connected, understanding what is the pulse on the floor. I think that's the most important thing.
Great. Avinash, your perspective on this?
Well, it's an evolving game. So for me personally, what works is it operates at two levels. One is that I have a usual habit of walking around the office all the time. So I don't like to stay in one place and just sit behind a desk. And when you walk around, you see all the ages and all different teams. So you hop in, you talk to a few people, you get a new interesting thing that you learn as a nugget. So that's one of the insights that happens logically because when you're walking out. The second thing is obviously institutionally, what we end up doing is we have periodic sessions with fresher people, and like I said, this cohorts and the things that we talk about. So we do have where actually the second layer to me does not sit in the room, so that you don't get an overawed because these guys are anyway not really, they will not open up if their own boss are directly in that room. So you kind of remove that layer, you sit with that first line, and then it's a very informal freewheeling kind of a conversation. And the most important thing that it does in you is you pick up these certain snippets, but most importantly what you cannot imbibe from others is your natural innate curiosity. So for example, if I am not using all kinds of AI personally, I will not be on top of what the game is going. So no amount of sitting with somebody will tell me this. But when I have it, then I know what it does. I don't know how it does it. Then I go for the how to the junior. Okay, I have known that this happens because this is the output that a video AI can make. Show me an example of how you do it. And he gets excited and you learn. So the innate curiosity for learning has to be in you as a leader. Only then any one of these things will open. Otherwise, if you have to think that, oh, I know everything just because I'm sitting on the top chair, then you are as dead as anything else, right? To stay alive, it's like stay curious all the time, right? Otherwise you are anyway gone.
Oh, very nicely put. Vishvi, what's your perspective on this?
To me, I think it's been a very humbling and enriching experience. I think the biggest realization is my way is not the only way. So I have to treat generation as a culture, and I have grown up working with different countries. The way I talk to a person in Tokyo vis-a-vis a way I talk with a person in New York is very different because here you need your language barriers, you need to have somebody to translate. So it's going to be very slow paced. But for an American, I can talk in a much more natural way. Likewise, how I treat a 22-year-old versus a 55-year-old has to be different. So generation, I call it as generational cultural intelligence. And that's something which I think as leaders we need to imbibe. Listen more. My advice would be listen more, not label people. Build trust before you drive change. That drives credibility. You establish credibility so you are accepted, and create space for voices unlike your own. So I think it's about impact and inclusion to me.
Great. I think some great points here, right from from Sanjeev, Avinash, and Vishwanath about staying grounded. Logo se juda rehna hai. By staying curious, I think that's extremely important, and also having this cultural, emotional EQ and adaptability, which will shape leaders of today and for tomorrow. So as we wrap up today's discussion, I think we've uncovered something profound. Generational diversity isn't just a demographic reality we need to manage. It's one of the most underutilized competitive advantages sitting right in front of us. And in this discussion, we have seen across 3 leaders and 3 great organizations how the power is being truly unlocked. We have heard different perspectives to drive innovation and how we can orchestrate something truly extraordinary from all of this. What has also stood out for me is that actually every generation just is keen to be heard, to be listened to be transparent, and to do meaningful work and to be valued. I think that is a common thread that we could say across all generations. And the magic is not in our similarities, but in how our differences are truly leveraged to create these breakthrough results. So as we leave today, we should ask ourselves, are your organizations really leveraging generational diversity or just managing it? So thank you so much to our exceptional panelists, Mr. Sanjeev Rastogi, Mr. Vishwanath PS, and Mr. Avinash Kaul, for the wisdom and candor. You are leaving all of us richer. Thank you. And I've handed it over to Neha.
Thank you so much, Ahmed, and the speakers for your invaluable insights. We'll just move to a quick Q&A. I've received 2 questions in my chat window. These questions are open to all. Anybody can pick it up and address. Question number 1 is from Mahi, which is how do you maintain fairness and consistency in leadership decisions while accommodating different generational needs and working styles? Anyone of you?
If I can go, I think, it's about coming out of the ivory tower, so make decisions very inclusive. So we have policies. When we make policies, we look at is a proper representation. It could be a finance policy, but it's going to impact different sections of our people. So it's about consultative approach, ensure that everyone is heard, and also communicate in a way that there is fairness. People understand. Some of them may agree to disagree because it's not a popularity contest, right? But I think as long as you are able to explain the why behind it and reason it out, I think it gets very well accepted.
Sure. Thank you so much, Vishwanath, for addressing that. We have another question from Faisal, which is beyond policies and frameworks, what daily leadership behaviors matter most in making multi-generational teams actually work?
If I can take that, I think it's fair and simple. You have to lead by example. If you don't lead by example, nothing will ever happen, because most of the people in the organization will reflect what your own personal beliefs are. If your personal beliefs are that you are just doing it to tick a box, okay, fine, I'm gender diverse and I'm age diverse and I'm XYZ diverse, and it just stays as a tick box, it's not really going to manifest. But if you live these, established these principles, and then they're seen in daily life, you walk around, you talk to people, you roll up your sleeve, you are seen with anyone, all of them in genuinity, then that's what reflection is, that you get reciprocated genuinity in everything that people do, which will also address the first question that you talked about, which is your KRAs are listed. It doesn't matter whether you're a 20-year-old or a 40-year-old. You have an output to be driven. There is all fairness because you are being compared on the same metric. So it's not an subjective assessment. It's an objective assessment. And as long as the metric is that you are able to measure whatever you're doing, I don't think you should worry about, the favoritism or not. On the other hand, what you should do is you should have an accelerated program for taking these superstar youngsters and put them on an accelerated path towards growth so that they can take over the mantle faster than what you want to leave your own job.
Sure. Thank you, Avinash, for addressing this. So this brings us to the end of the session. Thank you, Ahmed, for driving this discussion beautifully, and to our speakers for the wonderful insights that you have shared, and everybody in the audiences for joining us today. This discussion has given us truly some practical takeaways, and I'm sure the audiences will have some new ideas to reflect upon and apply. We look forward to having you with us in our upcoming panel discussions as well. The next panel discussion is on AI plus human intelligence, the new collaboration model for high-performing teams, scheduled on 1st of January 2026. Until then, stay inspired and stay connected. Thank you, everybody.
I think I'll take this time to, really thank Ahmed and the fellow panelists. I think, and Neha, you've done a fabulous job in getting us together and having a structured conversation on all of these things. So thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you, Neha. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Dear friends.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you. Rest of the day.
Bye.